Actually, there's one of his poems at the beginning of this. And if you look at it, it's actually shaped like a bomb. But I had forgotten that in the 10 years since I published the book, and I opened the book the other day. I was like, oh my God. So here it is. And despite, this one is called, To Palestine, to Gaza. And despite Israel's death sentences, like lead, cast upon the head, gnawing at our life, clinging to it like a flea to a kitten, and stuffed in our throats the moment we say amen to the prayers of old women and men, blocking their ways to God. We dream and pray, clinging to life even harder every time a dear one's life is forcibly rooted up. We live, we do. So he was a dear one, and his life has been forcibly rooted up, but he wants us to take his stories and the stories of his students, and he wants us to make it a tale, as he said in his very famous kite poem. And thank you to the friend who brought the kite today, because it's an important poem. And so then we released the book in this country in 2014, and he and two of the young writers, and you see them in some of these lovely photos that came to us from our friend Yusuf al-Jamal, who was one of the young writers who came, and Rawan Yeri. So Yusuf and Rawan and Refaat came, and my company and the American Friends Service Committee brought them to this country and toured them around the whole country. They got to meet a lot of people. Refaat later said that until he came to this country, he had never met a Jewish person who was not armed and trying to block his way and bully his life and oppress his life. So actually, some of the people that he met on that tour became close friends, including Elise Cohen in Atlanta. He stayed in Elise's home. And I mean, I just think that shutting 2.3 million people up in a concentration camp called Gaza is not good for anybody. Of course, it's not good for them, but it's not good for us either, we who are outside. So we brought them in 2014, and sure enough, that summer, the Israelis launched yet another of their assaults, to which they give the obscene name mowing the lawn every time they go in. And in 2014, it lasted for 51 days, and I think 2,200 people were killed that summer. And almost immediately, I contacted Refaat and Laila, because I'd published two of her books by that point, Gaza Mom and the Gaza Kitchen Cookbook, and invited them to edit a collected volume. So this one is Gaza Unsilenced. And this also, I think, is deeply worth reading. They tried a different approach this time. It was not fiction. It's mainly short essays, poems, reflections, photos from people in Gaza and from Palestinians and Palestinian allies worldwide, but mainly Palestinians from Gaza. So I would like to read just, these books are so timely. Although, of course, what's happening now, I can't even remember what dreadful name the Israelis have given to this one. That one, 2014, it was called Protective Edge. Beyond words, as I say. So this is Refaat's editor's afterword for this book. I'll just read a couple of pages quickly. This one is called, "When Will We Go Back Home?" I will be back, I promise. So this is his reflection on some of his experiences during the 2014 assault. "The last time my niece Ranim, 4, saw her dad was when the Israeli shells were falling on the heads and houses of more than 100,000 Palestinians in Shija'iyya. You have to understand, Shija'iyya is a portion of Gaza City that is very historic and very tight-knit. I know a number of people who live in Shija'iyya and have had the honor of visiting the place. And right now it's just being, or has been, pulverized. Anyway, sorry, that's my aside. "My brother Muhammad took the time to help guide many families to shortcuts in a desperate attempt to escape the flying shrapnel and debris. Muhammad kept close to his wife, his son Hamza, 1, and his daughter Ranim. I will be back soon, he assured his weeping kids and worried wife. I will be back, I promise. Bringing his family and many others to a relatively safer place, he thought he should go back to help others evacuate. My brother Muhammad never came back. He never came back, not because he did not keep his word, but rather because the Israeli occupation had developed a policy of destroying people and their relationships. Israel made sure my brother Muhammad and a couple thousand Palestinians would never get to see their family members ever again. Ever since, Ranim has been asking about her dad. When will dad come back? Why does Baba not come back? She keeps asking. Only watery eyes and pained hearts answer her quizzical looks. However we try to distract her, nothing replaces a father, let alone a loving father who made his small family his own world. We thought that taking Ranim to see the pile of rubble that was once our house might help her understand something. Until my elder brother's nephew, Muhammad, 6, went to see the house with his father. Muhammad kept nagging for more than a month. He wanted nothing but to go back to Shija'iyya and see our house. When he was there, when he saw all the destruction and ruins, little Muhammad dangled his head and said, I wish I had not come. Taking Ranim and the little ones to see a pile of rubble, to see the pile of rubble our house was turned into, is now out of the question. We are only counting on a speedy reconstruction process that will mitigate the pain and return the kids to their house. A month after the Israeli onslaught, Ranim must have realized that her dad will not be coming back. She approached my mother and she said, Tata, I dislike my dad. He does not come back. My mother has not recovered from Ranim's remark. It was like her son was killed twice. But I can only imagine the psychological damage that has already caused Ranim, who has developed a tendency toward absent-mindedness, to talk to herself. 2 months ago, her mom found her giggling and mumbling. When asked what she was doing, Ranim said, my dad gave me candy. Her tiny fist remained clenched for a long time. So many stories. And he tells them so beautifully and so directly. And he encouraged so many other people to tell their stories. So I guess now is the time to hand over to Pam.
Okay, I think those are the slides. So I actually, when I think back about why my voice is sounding so terrible, I think I started feeling sick like the day after Refaat was killed, and I'm convinced that they're connected in some way. Because for me, it's not just Refaat. As I'll talk about later, he was very instrumental in a project that I founded and helped run called We Are Not Numbers. We've lost 3 of our writers have been killed, 3 are missing. We have no idea if they're alive or dead. So the stress is really taking a toll. So Refaat, I'm going to talk about him a little bit by walking through some of his story. So those of you who are not as familiar with him can get to know him a little bit better, and I will insert my perspective and thoughts as I go along. I'm going to go to the next one. Yeah. So I included this for really important reasons. I think most people heard about Refaat sort of recently and it was always that "If I Die" poem, right? That most of you have seen. And so I remembered this paragraph I had written. It was a quote in an interview he had done where he was talking about when he was a child. And it mentions that he loved flying kites. So that's where, that it makes sense then that the kite reappears in some of his work, including that poem. But also the really important thing is he, Helena mentioned Shajayam, he was very proud of that neighborhood. He was proud of Gaza. He's proud of Palestine. But he grew up when the Israeli troops had not been withdrawn yet. So he grew up, and Helena mentioned he'd never really seen Jewish people who weren't against him, because he grew up with Israeli troops around him. They were still, and that became his childhood. It's really important, I think. One thing I've been trying to stress to people who focus only on the Hamas attack of October 7th is you have to understand the context as to why would people get to that point of doing something so violent. It doesn't come out of nowhere. The people who are Hamas fighters are people, they're humans. They were made by something. And they were made by experiences like this. When you grow up in a place, I lived there for 3 years. I wish more Americans could. What I always say is, I bet you I'll give an American 6 months there, and somebody will be throwing weapons, throwing missiles, because of the daily grind of existence there. And that's what you grow up with, and that shapes you. Of course, it shapes you. Go ahead. So we've already heard about Gaza Writes Back. The reason why I wanted to mention this is because that was I had met him while I was living in Gaza earlier. Weird Out Numbers hadn't started yet, but how I came across Refaat, though, in addition to Rami Abdu introduced me, but I was freelance reporting for Interpress Service, and I had always heard from all the young people, English language is like one of the most popular majors there, not because it's English literature, and not because they're all that passionate about old classic literature. It's because they need to learn the English language, because the two best jobs, the chance of earning a decent income there, is either working for the government or for an international NGO. And for an international NGO, you have to know English well. And there weren't that many teachers in Gaza who either spoke English, they didn't have many native speakers, and the quality of teaching was not that great. I heard over and over and over again how most of the teachers young people told me about taught by rote, out of the book, not experiential. There was no real interaction. But when I asked them, well, can you tell me of somebody who was good? Refaat was always the one they mentioned by everybody uniformly. And the reason why I turned to him later when I started Refaat Out Numbers is because there are other really good writers, like there's a man named Abusalim. I don't know him. He's coming out with another war diary. He's very, very talented. But when you turn to people in Gaza to help others, they're more focused on their own writing, their own work. Refaat never was. He was always interested. That's why the books you see him involved with were always lifting up his students. Mm-hmm. Yes, some of his own writing, but he was always lifting up his students, and that's unusual. So that's how I ended up seeking Refaat out, because I was doing a story about the state of education in Gaza. And Refaat was the example of somebody who really, despite all the limitations, despite what he grew up with, despite the fact that he didn't have proper equipment, et cetera, he loved his students. And that's how I came to know him. So before Refaat Out Numbers started, he came before the war, the last really major war in 2014, he came to the US. Next slide. And I was able to meet him again now in DC. You see a photo here. There's myself and Refaat and the two writers who was with him. And what was really special in my mind about that trip is that we took him to the Shakespeare Library. And I just remember when the curator who came out, it was very quiet that day, not many other people. And once he realized that Refaat really was a Shakespeare scholar, he gave him a private interview, private tour. And oh my goodness, that's how I remember Refaat. I mean, he was so lit up to be with another scholar like that. It was lovely, lovely to see. Yeah, next slide. And the other picture I wanted to show is here he is enjoying the DC area. And this is where I want to remember him. This is where I want to remember everybody from Gaza being able to be free. This, to me, when I look at this photo, I think of freedom. I think of not having to worry about all the things he has to. And that's what I wish for everybody in Gaza. Next slide. So he, as you heard already, he went to Malaysia to get his PhD. And again, this is before the 2014 war started. And I did a story at that time for, I think it was either Al Jazeera English or Middle East Eye. And I interviewed him along with a number of other Palestinians from Gaza who were out of Gaza. And it's very hard, as you probably hear, to watch, you know, for Gazans who are out, it's torture to have to watch a war from afar. And Refaat was one of them at that time. And as I indicated here, you know, people in his family started to be killed, you know, while he was in Malaysia trying to finish his PhD. And you hear was one thing after another. It was his wife's sister, it was his wife's brother, and then his own brother. Next slide. So you see, here's a quote that I got from him during the interview. He expresses something that I'm actually hearing from some of my other writers. You'd think that they'd be relieved to be out of Gaza, but he wanted nothing more than to be back. He wanted to be back with his family. He wanted to be back with his people. It felt wrong to be away. And so he did everything he could to go back and reunite with them.
Actually, could I just interject about his late brother, Mohammed El-Haddad?
That's his brother, by the way.
Mohammed played the Big Bird type comic person in a Gaza sitcom, children's show.
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's his
like you kill Big Bird.
Yeah, so he cut short his PhD studies to go home. Next slide. So this is where, so then the 2014 war kept raging, and this is when Weird Numbers sort of grew out of. Just briefly, this telling how the idea came about is, you heard mention my other collaborator, Ahmed Al-Niouk, who's in London today, working for the Palestinian embassy, but I had met him when I was in Gaza. I didn't know him very well, but I noticed on his Facebook page that all of a sudden his profile photo had changed to a picture of, I found out later was his brother. But also here's somebody who's been very prolific in posting, and all of a sudden nothing. So I reached out, and I did the typical thing everybody says, which is, how are you? Are you okay? His first response, and I think most people do it, sort of wrote, I'm okay. And I said, my famous line that all the writers know me by is, no, tell me something real. Don't say okay. Tell me what's really going on. And that's when I found out that his brother had been killed. Something that he doesn't talk publicly about, but his brother was a Qassam fighter. And it's and of course he didn't feel free then to talk to me, an American. He was assuming that I would be judgmental. But instead of, this is advice I give to everybody, instead of like not talking about it, like a lot of times when you hear somebody really close to somebody has been killed, you tend to, oh, I'm sorry, and then you go quiet, or you don't talk about it, you try to change the subject. Instead, I knew that he was one of those young English students who was trying to improve his written English, but didn't feel like he was very good, and he wasn't actually very good at the time. So I said, why don't you tell me about your brother? Let's celebrate his life. Help me get to know him. And so over a 3-month period, we passed back and forth this essay about his brother. And I learned who he was as a person. Why did he join the resistance? What experiences shaped him? And he helped me grow to love him, like Ahmed grew to love him. And at the end of this 3-month sort of experience, we both had benefited. He came out of his depression. He said his writing actually had improved more in 3 months than it had in a year. I'm a writer by background. I'm a journalist by background. And I ended up with a story that I realized the West needed to hear. That who are these fighters? They're people. They're humans who were children and evolved that way for a reason. And so I ended up publishing the story. And I just thought why can't we duplicate that experience for other young people? The idea was to pair them with mentors, professional writers around the world, because the other goal was that to have the same kind of, because we're lifelong friends now, and could we do that for other people? So they had champions. And so that's where the idea for We Are Not Numbers came from. And of course, I turned to Refaat. We wanted to have like a training program for people who applied, so we could sort of assess their writing skills. And Refaat was you'll see in a quote later, he was an expert at the principle of show, don't tell. And that is, as young writers, that's what I find most of the Gaza youth need help with, is the show, don't tell principle. So Refaat became the teacher for all the beginning cohorts of young writers. And just go back for a minute, you'll see we have more than 1,300 stories now. And actually we're working on an anthology of our stories because we have an unique, I think, trove of, through their eyes from one major war to another. You can see through their eyes what is the same about Gaza and what's really different, mostly the same. But we can sort of tease out how Gaza changed and evolved through the eyes of these young people over 9 years. And we did just get this is just one sad note I want to say, and this is important for all activists, I think. We got this wonderful story in the New York Times, but this would not have come about if we hadn't had a lot of violence. Ahmed Al-Niyot, for instance, yes, he lost 21 members of his family in one bombing. And he has gotten overwhelmed with media interviews. But you know what? If 3 members of his family had been killed, he probably wouldn't have gotten much attention. It was the fact that he had 21. I mean, so we get all this attention, but why? And this is my message to the world. If you want to know why that October 7th event happened, that's why. Because we do not pay attention when there's not violence. They've tried everything else, and the only time they get attention is when there's violence. So it's really our collective fault that October 7th happened, in my opinion. Next slide. So I mentioned what was so special about Refaat as a teacher. I have 2 quotes here from 2 of our writers. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that first point, the fact that he was a threat, not because he was a mass militant or something. He was a threat because he was an intellectual who spoke his mind. But the thing is, Eunice talks about the fact that the reason why he loves English today is Refaat, because he had a teaching style that really engaged. I mean, it's like Eunice was one, for instance, he studied English to get a job, not because he loved it. He didn't see himself as a writer either. It was Refaat that instilled, developed a love in it. And he was also a very tough critic, though. I don't know if you agree with this, but I saw him, and he did not let you off the hook if he thought you could do more. He was pretty tough, and some writers didn't like that. But it was a tough love for sure. Next slide. And this is Osman Al-Darawi, is one of our original writers, and he's stuck with the project all this time. He writes poems, and I'll let you read it yourself a little bit, but he talks about the fact that he didn't know him from university. He knew him through We Are Not Numbers, because he's a physiotherapist, actually, not an English major. But he tells that sort of a nice story, I think, when Refaat would talk about show, don't tell in the little details. He said, let readers into your world as if they're sitting with you, with your grandmother, as you sip a cup of tea, she tells her tales. That's the kind of granular detail he wanted. And he did humanize his enemies. There's a poem I'm going to read at the end that I think he shows he actually tried hard to understand the Israelis as well. I think this particular war destroyed a lot of hope he had that we could bridge that, but he really did. Go ahead. This is the last photo I had. I was, you can't see me, but I was there. This is in 2016. This is Refaat. This is Rami Abdu. I had all the writers together. This was when, unfortunately, my last time in Gaza, because then Israel arrested me at the airport, and I ended up being deported and banned for life. So I'm no longer allowed to return. But so this photo is very special to me. I never thought it'd be my last time. Okay, next one. This was the last photo that I know of that was taken of Refaat. This was on his birthday in September. One of his colleagues at Islamic University of Gaza took it. But such happier times.
Do you need me to?
But yeah, could you? The next one, actually, I'm going to show you a video. I think these two videos you're going to be seeing that I think are really important let me just introduce this first. He had his family home was in Tel Hawa, a neighborhood. It was bombed. And he walks in the rubble. So try to listen to what he's saying because he talks as he gives you a tour of what this is his home he's going to show you after the bomb. Now you have to hit
Oh, okay.
no, you have to hit down. Either I think you just hit this and it'll play.
No, okay. You're right.
We need sound though. There's no sound. Yeah.
Let's see.
Get as loud as you can.
Is this the video?
It's there's sound with it though. Can you get the sound?
I'm not sure why. Let's see.
Yeah, either one will be much use if you don't can't hear sound.
Just give me 1 minute.
Okay. There's I'm not sure if you can hear it though, but just coming out of, can you hear that? You can, yes. I will see when you find them.
This is Israel. Things of 7th floor, 9th floor towers have been destroyed here, and many others were completely damaged beyond recognition. Speak about hundreds of families displaced forever. Homes. People left home in a hurry. We left everything. All our business. Room and George graffiti. Not sure what it meant. I'm sure there was a lot of looting and theft by the Israeli soldiers, stealing cash, stealing gold.
We'll start off.
This is Israel. Things of 7th floor, 9th floor towers have been destroyed here, and many others were completely damaged beyond recognition. Speak with hundreds of families displaced forever. Homes. People left homes in a hurry. We left everything, the clothes, the properties, probably the cash. In one of the buildings, the soldiers entered each and every room and wrote graffiti. Not sure what it meant. I'm sure there was a lot of looting and theft by the Israeli soldiers, stealing cash, stealing gold, taking souvenirs out of this genocide, this onslaught. Complete and utter destruction. This is in an area where there was no Hamas fighters. Witnessed probably the least resistance. But again, it was destroyed completely. That's a very important issue here. whether Palestinians resist or not, whether Palestinians fight back or not, Israel killed them, or slaughtered them, or destroyed their homes. So why not fight back? Why not resist? Why not defend ourselves? One box. Some of these are mine. This is mine. I get a other the abridged copy, an Irish book by Jonathan Swift. There's somebody's kitchen, furniture, memories, lives, life savings, everything.
The next video, go ahead. I don't know how many of you saw this. I think it's really important for everybody to watch. This is an interview that Refaat did for Electronic Intifada, where I think he, I'm let's speak for itself. Go ahead.
We know that it's very bleak, it's very dark. There's no way out. If there's no water, there is no way out of Gaza. What should we do? Like drown? Like commit mass suicide? Is this what Israel wants? And we're not going to do that. And I was telling some friend the other day that I'm an academic. Probably the toughest thing I have at home is an expo marker. But if the Israelis invade, if they target us, charge at us, open door to door to massacre us, I'm going to use that marker, throw it at the Israeli soldiers, even if that is the last thing that I would be able to do. And this is the feeling of everybody. We are helpless. We have nothing to lose.
Next.
We know that.
So I don't know how many of you know just the details of what happened. This is really, really important, how he was killed, because Israel has said all along that it only targets people who are part of Hamas. Refaat was an intellectual, but you know, when he was killed, it was a third floor, it was 3 floors in the apartment building. He was in his sister's apartment on the 2nd floor. The rocket, the missile, whatever it was, it right in the 2nd floor, first floor stood. It went right into that apartment. So Hamas, Israel can target very precisely what it chooses to. They wanted Refaat. And he had, oh yeah, they wanted Refaat. So it's really, really important that you understand this. This was not part of he was not collateral damage. He was targeted specifically. And so the next one. If you think about why he was targeted, you know, his mother was convinced that it was because he kept speaking out. I think there's 2 reasons. One is I do think Israel is trying to destroy the class of people that Gaza needs to rebuild. The teachers, the doctors, the journalists who will help rebuild, but also the thing that I love so much about Refaat, in addition to being a good teacher, is he would not back down. He spoke his truth. One of the things that was very special to me about Refaat, we became very close for 2 reasons. One was we are not numbers, but the other one was, I'd say about 1.5 years into founding the project, I became the target of a very, very vicious online campaign that was the These are people who were claiming, for instance, that the money that I raised for We Are Not Numbers was being used to finance my Caribbean vacations. You know, and it was really, I can't tell you how many times I'd be in tears, ready to quit. I don't know if you remember, it was horrible. But Refaat, if it had not been for him and his counseling and telling me not to quit, not to back down, to be confident in the truth of what I was doing, I don't think I could have gotten through this. Now, Refaat then became a target himself. I could give you other examples, but you know, so despite his mother's fears, and she turned out perhaps to be correct, he kept doing interviews. He would walk a couple of miles to find good internet so he could do an interview. If somebody asked him, he felt like he had an obligation to his people, to reach as many people as possible. So unlike other people who were too afraid, many of my writers are, he felt like he had to. So he did the interviews, and he was extremely outspoken. So give you one example, he was on BBC when he compared the October 7th to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and BBC basically came out publicly then when they were attacked for that, and said they would no longer use him as a spokesperson. New York Times had done that to him earlier. On X, for instance, he also
actually refused to publish a piece by Musab about him.
Really?
Yeah. So.
There's a whole story behind that New York Times
Yeah,
piece.
no,
And actually, I'm going to share something, a little story on X. And he was, he also debunked all these rumors out there about those
40 beheaded babies.
Yeah. And, one of the people who really came out and has attacked him was, I don't know, how many of you know who Barry Weiss is? Anybody know who Barry Weiss is? Anybody?
Nobody should know.
No. I'm going to tell a story about Barry, though. Barry used to be on the New York Times editorial board. And that's where she got a lot of notoriety. Now she's not with them, but she's very, very outspoken still for various Zionist organizations. But Barry, I had a very negative experience with her. One of my young writers, who was very young and naive, lived in a very oppressive marital arrangement. And she came to me one day and she said, she was so excited. I'm going to be in the New York Times. I'm going to be in the New York Times. I'm like, are you kidding? Because her English wasn't very good at that point. She's a very talented writer now, but at that time, her English wasn't even very good. And I couldn't understand, how would you get in the New York Times? Well, it turned out a friend of hers had introduced her to Barry. Barry was looking for stories of people in Gaza who would be willing to say bad things about the conservative government there. And this is the time when the border protests were going on. And I guess her friend knew how unhappy she was about the repressive environment at home. And Barry just had one phone conversation with her over the phone. And then Haneen showed me, but I told her, you can't be in the New York Times. She goes, no, see? And she showed me this article that was all prepped and ready to go. And I read it, and I'm like, this doesn't sound like Haneen. And it was also things that would have gotten it. And it was very critical of her husband. She names her husband and says all this stuff that I knew she didn't believe. And I said, Haneen, do you realize what you're saying?
This be a warning to all husbands out there.
And she said, oh, no, I didn't say any of that. It says, Haneen, yes, you did. And I read it to her, and she was shocked. This was not Haneen who wrote this. Barry wrote it based on this conversation that they'd had. And so Haneen then, once she realized and got over her excitement of being in the New York Times, she called Barry and she got it pulled. The next day, Barry was on Morning Joe, and she talked about this op-ed and how it had been pulled because the writer had been afraid Hamas would kill her. Totally not the reason at all. But these are the types of people, and this is what the extent that they will go to malign people who just speak a different opinion. And that's the thing about Refaat. Even though I'm sure he knew it was personal danger to him, he spoke his truth. He would not back down. Next slide. And I want to, this is a tribute that Rami wrote to Refaat that I thought it was sort of sums up what everybody thought about him. There's a poem that you haven't read. Everybody's heard the If I Die poem, but there's one he wrote in 2012 that I thought was even more important in terms of its message to everybody. It's a poem that he wrote to Israelis. And it was called I Am You. And I'm just going to read a part of it. It said, 2 steps, 1, 2. Look in the mirror. The horror, the horror. The butt of your M16 on my cheekbone. The yellow patch it left. The bullet-shaped scar expanding like a swastika, snaking across my face. I am you. I'm your past, haunting your present and your future. I strive like you did. I fight like you did. I resist like you resisted. And for a moment, I take your tenacity as a model, but you're holding the barrel of a gun between my bleeding eyes. Note this bullet in your gun. If you sniff it, it has your blood and mine. It has my present and your past. It has our shared future. That's why we are twins. Same life track, same weapon, same suffering, same facial expressions drawn on the face of the killer. Same everything, except that in your case, the victim has evolved backward into a victimizer. All you have to do is close your eyes tightly so that you can see in your mind's eye, then look into the mirror. 1, 2, I am you. I am your past. And by killing me, you kill you. And let's see.
Thank you, Pam. Laila,
Oh, did you?
and let me introduce you first. Laila El-Haddad is a Palestinian American author and journalist from Gaza. She frequently speaks on the situation there, where she spent many years raising her young son and working as a reporter for Al Jazeera, as well as the intersection of food. Al Jazeera. And she also works on the intersection of food and politics. She is the author of The Gaza Kitchen, a Palestinian culinary journey, and co-editor of the anthology Gaza Unsilenced. A graduate of Duke University and the Harvard Kennedy School, focusing on political science, public policy, and history. She makes her home in Clarksville, Maryland, and with her husband and their 4 children, one of whom is here. Welcome, Laila. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and I apologize, we were late, lots of traffic.
No worries.
So I don't know what was said, but this was very moving, and I don't think this is working. But, so I don't think I am nearly as prepared as you are, Pam,
You
and,
have to speak into it just for the
oh,
live stream.
okay, yeah. I don't think I'm not nearly as prepared as you are, so thank you for being so thorough. Maybe I'll just talk a little bit about how I knew Refaat. So we first met actually in Maryland, in Columbia, Maryland, where he was on a book tour that Helena helped arrange for Gaza Writes Back, along with Yusuf and I think it was Rowan, right? It was. And we were both the same age, and I had just had, not her, but another child, and he had a child the same age, and we went on a long walk, all of us, around the Centennial Park there, and he picked my daughter up, and he just, you know, he loved nature, he loved the outdoors. But the first thing he said to me when he saw me, and I just want to contextualize, I'm sure you talked a lot about We Are Not Numbers and that program that didn't exist yet, or maybe it just started.
No, you didn't.
And the first thing he said to me was, Gaza Mom. And he said, I have been following your work for years at a time when almost nobody was writing in English from Gaza. And he was so excited to meet me. And I was, you know, I didn't know him obviously, but we got to know each other. And from there, you know, we edited this anthology together. And we stayed in touch. And during that specific year, he hadn't seen his family for over 3 years. And I know when he was holding my daughter, he was remembering his own children and said, I haven't seen them in X number of years. And he was, you know, that was really difficult for him. I went to Gaza in 2019, and it was a very brief visit, and he insisted I come and speak to one of his classes at the university. And I don't know if I have like a 12-second, is there any way to street? Sorry, I was totally not prepared. I sent it to you on WhatsApp. I guess there may not
What's
be.
that?
Is there?
I'll
Okay.
figure it out.
Anyway, it's not super important. We just took a little selfie video. He was extremely excited. The students were, and he was like their father figure. You know, they're all like talking and clamoring and wanting to talk. He's like, everybody sit down, quiet, quiet, quiet. You know, sit down, sit down. And they really looked up to him. I mean, he was a father figure. And that was the first time I saw him kind of in action. And I saw the students and I said, well, what do you want me to talk to them about? And he said, oh, they'll have plenty of questions. And they just all kept saying to me, teach us like how, teach us how to tell our stories. That's all we want to know. How can we, and it, I don't really know how to articulate. There's something incredibly sad about that. They said, we just want to be able to have the Western world listen to us, to hear us. How can we do that effectively? You have kind of straddled both worlds. You've been in Gaza, you've been here. Teach us how to effectively do that. Like, what are your tips for doing that? We just want to be heard. And really, that's the role that I saw him taking on for all those years, is he raised this entire generation, not alone, of course, with the help of others. But I say he essentially equipped them with what I like to call the tools of literary resistance. And I even add in the language of those that have been responsible for their dispossession. And I think there's something incredibly powerful about that. Is that me?
Yeah.
This is us. Oh, it's not streaming yet. Okay. There was something incredibly powerful about that. And this was not the case. There wasn't anyone doing this in Gaza prior to Refaat. This is the truth. Prior to 2014, I remember going back in 2010 and then 2013 when I was researching the Gaza Kitchen, and some of his students at the time who were still college students, who are now in their own right accomplished, scholars and professors and writers, and one of them is sitting right here. Among them was Mohammed Suleiman. Some of you might be familiar with him. He's in Australia now as a lecturer, incredible intellectual. He came up to me and he said, oh, you want to play this? It's just a fun, brief video, but it speaks to his spirit and the students as well. And this was now in an area that no longer exists, unfortunately. It's been completely destroyed.
Hi, everyone. I'm in the IUG, the Islamic University of Gaza, in the English department. Just gave a talk here, and everyone's going to say hello.
It just reminds me, and I don't know, I felt there was something really special about that visit, because there was I had this really bad feeling inside that, it wouldn't be repeated. I mean, inshallah it will, but anyway, that was the last time that I had seen him. But I don't know what I was saying before, but about his contributions to the students. So that's when I try to explain to people what his contribution was and how he changed sort of the landscape, the literary landscape in Gaza, and especially amongst young people who, by the way, make up 75% of Gaza, right, are under the age of 25. I mean, I keep repeating that over and over. Most of whom have never left Gaza, and most of whom, before this onslaught, this genocide, have never had any interaction with an Israeli aside from through the medium of war, through tanks and through drones. And I mean, this is something I keep mentioning as well. And I was speaking with Musab Abu Toha the other day, and he said, Laila, the first time I ever saw an Israeli in my life was when they abducted me and stripped me and beat me. And this is also a renowned poet. And so anyway, he took them and I think he was, again, trying to teach them, how do we convert that energy and this frustration, this anger into something really powerful that can resonate. I'll just talk a little bit about our most recent interactions. Starting from the very beginning, I checked in on him and he spoke. He was kind enough to do a Zoom teach-in with me in our community in Colombia. And he sent me a picture. I don't know if do you see the picture of him holding his hand up like that? It was one of the ones I sent you.
Oh, this picture that we're looking at is that first time that you and
oh yes, this is where we took the walk. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's Yassine looking very young.
Thanks, Helena. We've all aged. I like to think he's still young, but okay. I sent it to you on WhatsApp. Anyway, if you can find it. If not, I have it here.
That's him listening to you.
Huh? Oh yeah. That's, I don't know what what context. Here it is. I just want to, if you can, I don't know if there's any way to, I had sent it to you earlier, but so he sent me a picture and it was basically him raising his hand up like this. And I was like, what am I looking at here? Right? Besides and he said, I had an idea. Can we turn this into an international campaign? Based on the young child, if you all remember, that was found in the very beginning of the war. Go ahead.
Just
Oh, yeah,
the
sorry.
life-
The young child who was found in the very beginning, a toddler. And all that they could find of her was her hand sticking out like this with a piece of bread. And so he had this idea of turning that into a campaign with people around the world taking pictures of their hand with, Gaza underneath. That never happened. So that may be one way to be able to honor his wishes. But that was, he was constantly thinking with me, what can we do? How can we strategize? How can we put an end to this? I was going through our communications, our WhatsApp, and he had told me maybe before moving to the school that his wife and his children and himself were all in 3 different locations, and his extended family was in 5 different locations. And that 2 days before he was killed, he told me that the shelling of the past 2 hours, I think this is one of the last messages he sent me, from 7 to 9 p.m. was equal to an entire week. And something about his demeanor and his tone, I feel like he felt it in his bones that, his days were numbered. I don't know what it was, but he felt it. And even until his last days, he was telling me he was volunteering with a team and we were trying to distribute things in his neighborhood. And he said, yeah, I can do that. Just even as the bombs were falling, he said, I can do that. We're going around, we're distributing much needed things. And the very last thing he sent me was an op-ed that hopefully you will see in the New York Times in the next 2 days, not by himself, but by the mayor of Gaza, who was a very close friend of his, Yahya Sarraj. And he asked me, can you please publish this? And that was the last thing I heard from him. And I've been working with the editor on that. But in the course of researching and fact checking, I don't know why, but the editors were really insistent on fact checking which animals died at the zoo. And I was like, why does it matter? Like the animals, anyway. So I dug it up and we found a video on Al Jazeera talking about exactly which animals. And I was really surprised to see Refaat make an appearance in this video. I don't know if you've seen this or not. But one of the things that he used to do was volunteer a lot and volunteer at the zoo. I don't know if you knew that, but it took me by surprise. I was like, wow, I had no idea. Maybe I'll just read. He sent me this one message where I asked him how, the usual question we always ask each other. How are you doing? What's your situation? What can I do? Sometimes I would just write one word. I would say to Refaat, I just wanted to see if he would respond. And he would respond back and go, Laila. And then that was our interaction. So it's okay, you're alive. So I just said, what's your situation? Your kids, your wife, what can I do? And this was November the 27th. And he said, the few things we have are running out. No electricity and almost no cooking gas, no vegetables and no fruits. We have some citrus. I think it was sour, some unripe lemons, cucumber and tomatoes after the pause, but they are very, very expensive. We use wood to cook rice or spaghetti or just eat za'atar and dates. We spend 5 hours each day carrying water, something that he said was really beginning to wear him down. I have only had 3 showers in 51 days. We are 25 people in a very small apartment of a 1-bedroom and a living room and a small room for the kids with many, and I found this kind of funny, with many kids in the place, we're going crazy, and with an old grumpy man with a million conspiracy theories. It's even worse. Almost everyone has a rash.
Was that him?
Huh?
Was that him?
I know, who knows? Maybe, I don't know. And with I don't think, and with almost everyone has a rash and a stomach ache and a fever, or all of them at once. So yeah, I really don't know what else to say, except that I remember at one point warning him on this. We have this media group that he was part of. And I just said to him, stop engaging with the trolls. Use your energy elsewhere, because they were just relentless. And I said, I'm not saying, and he was like, okay, mom. And I was like, no, look, I'm not saying this to be whatever the paternalistic, is that it? And about I said, but I'm serious. I said, it's only, and badly, and don't use your energy. We only have so much, energy.
I said the same thing to him because he used to tell me the same thing. Don't engage with the trolls.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Right.
And he was really being attacked. I mean,
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
But it's hard. But I don't know if he told you this too, but how his mom didn't want him to keep speaking out, like going all the media and using it.
No.
But
Well, I feel really bad that I had him speak on Chris Cuomo before realizing I was being slammed with media requests, and this was one that I sent him, and he was just like livid. I know. I have no idea why. I think initially we thought it was Chris Hayes, and it was a confusion in terms of what had happened, and he was very upset for obvious reasons. yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to just, if anyone has questions, I don't know how this
You know,
works.
it's like I have my conversations with my writers. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, but we still have one more speaker.
Oh,
So,
sorry. Okay,
no,
I didn't
no.
realize that. Is
Yeah.
it virtual?
No, we have him
Oh,
here
that's
with
right.
us.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Mahmoud, تفضل. So I would like to introduce Mahmoud Al-Yazji, who was one of Refaat's students. تفضل محمود.
You know, while he's coming up, I'll just add one more beautiful memory. Again, the last time I saw him and Nusayba, his wife, we had maftool together on the beach in Gaza and watched the sunset that she made herself. It was November, which is the season for maftool, Palestinian hand-rolled couscous. So that always sticks out in my mind.
Evening, everyone. First of all, thank you all for organizing this for Dr. Refaat, and thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Mahmoud Al-Yazji. I am a writer and a photographer and a video editor from the Gaza Strip. I had the privilege, and I am so proud. I was one of Dr. Refaat Alareer student in the Islamic University of Gaza. He taught me poetry, Shakespeare, and creative writing. I must say, Dr. Refaat Alareer was one of the best professors I ever had. He taught me everything that he can possibly teach, not only academically, but also in life. He was an inspiration for me in everything he did. Even the way he walks sometimes is like, sometimes I would walk by him and he would walk faster than me. He was like, come on, move faster, move faster. And he just taught me to get things done always. I was also inspired by Dr. Refaat Alareer from the way he teaches, like many of you mentioned. Dr. Refaat had a unique way of teaching students, a mixture of funny, deep knowledge of him, of the curriculum. Like I never focused in a 3-hour lecture before, but Dr. Refaat's, he was really amazing. And he would make making memes as part of the grades evaluation, which I really loved. Dr. Refaat always believed in his students. He personally believed in me as a writer. He taught me how to write. He taught me how to express myself more in my writings. He was really creative and awesome teacher. And I don't like just to refer to Dr. Refaat as my university professor. He was my teacher. He was my friend. He was like a father to me. One of the memories I had of Dr. Refaat, I asked him, what's your favorite hobby? And he answered, I like just looking at sentence structures and looking at the language and delve deep into dictionaries and words. And I told him that's boring. But I never thought how powerful words can be. He taught me how powerful can words be and how powerful stories can be. And he always supported me all the way. Like I would often send him stories on Google Docs, and he would just edit and leave his comments on the right side of the file. And I would edit and send it back and forth until we come up with something satisfying. And Dr. Refaat was hard to be satisfied, so I had to work really hard. Speaking of which, Dr. Refaat is not a person who would praise you in the face, but you would found out later that he spoke about you in front of other people. He would just praise you in front of other people. And the next thing you find is him sending you job websites, job links, or like training programs on WhatsApp, and telling you register in this. You have to register in this. You have to write, you have to work better, you have to work harder. And on November 27, he sent me a message on WhatsApp, something he does for all his students. He would often, even though he's under the bombardments, I'm safe here, he would send messages, and he would tell his students if he can do anything for them. And he asked me if I wrote something, if I published something, and I told him no. And he immediately encouraged me and told me to go and write something and publish. So I did, and I published an article with Electronic Intifada, and right away I sent it back to him. I told him I published. Due to the connection, and I'm sure he had a lot to do, he didn't see my message back then. And after his murder, I saw his Twitter account. I was scrolling down and I saw that he reposted my story on his Twitter account. He was always supporting, even though if we didn't really know, he was always there. He knew the details. He had a finger in every pie. He was teaching everywhere. He was he had maybe more than 1,000 students that he's working with, and somehow he would make you feel that you are special for him. You are his only student. He would always reply. He would always he was just always there. I am sure Dr. Refaat right now is in a better place, and I hope inshallah he's watching us right now and he's proud of us. And I personally will keep right back and fight with my pencil, and I will never give up on Palestine, and until Palestine is free. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahmoud. خليك. Thank you so much, Mahmoud. And I really appreciate you joining us tonight and saying those words. I was supposed to also say something about Refaat, but I mean, in your presence all, I will just defer you to the things that I wrote in on Twitter and in my Nation's article. But everything you said about Refaat being a tough teacher, I was there, and I think one of the things that we need to talk about as his students one day is what kind of scholarly and educational legacy he left behind. This model of turning a language that is used mostly in oppressing you, in censoring you, in obscuring you, in hiding your pain and suffering, into a tool for communicating these stories with the outside world. And this is something that I've been thinking about since he was killed. I've been thinking about how the way I learned English as a young person in Gaza was different from many people's experiences in studying and learning this language in other parts of the Arab world, where English becomes a class marker, and speaking it becomes a way to draw boundaries between, the upper classes and those who are privileged and those who have access to better institutions and resources and those who want to become westernized and embrace Western culture and values within their societies, which basically means, it's a class statement. These are people who are making a class statement and building a bubble and a shell around themselves and separating themselves from the richard of the earth and those who are not that fortunate in these societies. But in Gaza, it was different. I mean, there were people in Gaza who learned English to, of course, pursue careers and whatnot. But for us, it was also a way to, break the intellectual siege and break the intellectual blockade and travel beyond the confines of this. I hate to call it an open air prison, of this besieged place where 2 million people had to suffer under siege and blockade and isolation. So thank you all. And now we'll just, yes.
If I must add about Dr. Refaat, I must say that he always opened my eyes to details I never thought I would pay attention to. I remember Dr. Refaat in the first class I had with, he entered with his books, and after introducing himself and him getting to know us, he just grabbed the book. Before grabbing the book, actually, he was telling stories of his grandparents and his stories with his parents and his stories with the taxi driver he had with, or he had the ride with, or the barber. And I'm a person who's always putting the headphones in the transportation, or like scrolling my phone while my barber is cutting my hair, or I just don't pay attention. I used to go down, say to my grandmother, good morning, and just keep going. But right after Dr. Refaat's first class, I went down to my grandmother and I quote him. He said, if you have grandparents, you should go and beg them to tell you their stories. He made me open my eyes to these things, to the stories, to the things I live, like picking olives or like barbecue in a green area with my friends. I never thought about writing about these things, but now I do, all thanks to Dr. Refaat. He always cared about stories and details.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Before we open it for questions or comments, I just would like to talk a little bit about this booklet right here. Life Under Blockade, which you can find online for free. Around this time in 2018, Refaat trained a group of young people in Gaza, including some of whom were from We Are Not Numbers. And this was the product of a competition, a writing competition for young people to submit stories or essays talking about their experiences under blockade. And it was Refaat who did the training for this. And because these are available for free, I had the honor of co-editing this booklet when I worked with the American Friends Service Committee. If you go to their Gaza campaign, GazaUnlocked.org, you can find the booklet. And I'm going to give these copies tonight for free, but under one condition. This booklet comes with a study guide that you can download for free, and it's designed for communal study and communal reading. So I'll give you the copy if you promise me to download the study guide and read it with your friends and colleagues and members of your community. We have a limited supply of Refaat's books. So I'm not sure if people are more than welcome to buy them. But of course, feel free to order them online. And Helena is here. You can ask about ways to get the books. Additionally, the Division for Palestinian Rights at the United Nations gave us some books that you can take for free. They are in the very back of the room. These are different publications of the Division for Palestinian Rights, so feel free to grab one on your way out. Not the paintings, just the books. So yeah, well, let's open it for questions and comments, and just raise your hand, introduce yourself, and feel free to share anything you would like to share.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for coming to this panel. Thank you so much for sharing the stories and words. And I really wholeheartedly believe what Dr. Refaat had said, that the words are very powerful, because they are. I have basically two questions. One is that how do we carry on his legacy, especially for people that are at the forefront in activism and social justice work? Two, to me, I find him to be a very amazingly optimistic, peaceful warrior with his pen. The image, the video that was just shown after the bombing of his flat where he was in Gaza, and he's walking around, he seems so humble, so grounded, and he's able to illustrate and really kind of go into details, which I think one of his characteristics was, is to really go into details. So I have second question related to that is, given the fact that the horrific situation in Gaza and him living through this episodes of assassinations and killings and bombardment from Israel, and so many of his family members, including his brothers, being killed, what was he envisioning? I mean, he must have shared something about what he foresees in the future. I do believe, inshallah, that Palestine will be free. There's no question about that. It's not if, it's just a matter of when. But him going through so many challenges, personal and as a Palestinian and as a scholarly man, I would love to hear something that, obviously we find ourselves so much hopelessness in this dark times right now. And every day I wake up with it, just trying to find some energy to keep on going. But I would love to hear something from any of you or all of you. What did he had envisioned? What did he see? Did he predict anything? Obviously, nobody knows, but I'm sure with his experiences, would love to hear something like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So a couple of things in response to what you said. We are actually at Just World Books planning a new memorial edition. I don't even really want to call it a memorial edition, but whatever, a new edition of Gaza Writes Back. And one of the important things about Gaza Writes Back, because remember, we brought it out actually 10 years ago, when most people here in the United States probably didn't think about Gaza very much, or if they did, they thought all the people in Gaza probably had two horns and a tail, or, were all terrorists or something like that. So we were trying to make it, to humanize, to dehumanize the people who wrote in the book. And we put at the end, for each of the 15 contributors, we gave them like 2 pages to write your own bio, so that what we want to do, one of our plans now, is to go back to all these people who contributed to the book, because we'll still have the same stories in the book, and we'll have them use their 2 pages to write about what they've done since the book came out 10 years ago, and the effects, the influence that Dr. Refaat had on them. And that, I think, to have the tributes from his students is a really good way to memorialize him. We're going to have probably an introduction from Ali Abu Nima, and have this be an international thing. I have to also just tell you that his beautiful, poignant poem, If I Must Die, and if I could read it, but everybody knows it, has been translated already into something like 200 languages. I mean, his kite, the kite that he mentions in that poem, has flown around the world. This book has been published in 6 or 7 languages already. I mean, over the years, it's been published in Malay and a number of subcontinent Indian languages whose names I forget, and in Turkish. So, you know, his legacy is already going around the world. And I think that is what he wants to have happen. And his wonderful students, you know, all around the
I
world.
want to add to that and be a little bit more militaristic, I guess. You know, what broke my heart, and I don't know if you picked up on this at all, Laila, when you talked to him, but I mean, he was an optimist, but it was very discouraging to him to see. I mean, he really did believe. The reason why he did his interviews, as I mentioned before, his mother didn't want him to do it. He would walk a couple of miles just to find internet to be able to do. I mean, he kept doing those interviews. And the reason why he did is he kept believing in the power of telling stories. And it was very discouraging in a way to see that it wasn't to the extent that it should have. So I would say the best way to honor his legacy is, you know, the thing that I fear the most is that when the phase of active fighting ends, all this attention will go away. It always has. And yet what comes later, the level of destruction of not only infrastructure, but their intellectuals and their thought leaders, I think Israeli troops are going to stay there for a little while. I can't even imagine what that would be like to live with that. We have to maintain, I mean, to me, we have to sort of show Refaat's spirit that his words did matter. We have to keep supporting these young writers. We are on Numbers is a living project. They're continuing to generate more stories at great risk to themselves in some cases. And that's the reason why he stayed involved with it, because it was keeping that generation of stories going. Please pay attention to them. We tell them that their stories, and I want to believe this, and I have to admit, sometimes my own faith flags, that this is their form of resistance and that people will hear them. So my thing to honor his legacy is when this active phase of fighting ends, we cannot let up. It has to be intensified to make sure that not only is there a ceasefire, but they have some form of, like, I mean, one thought would be, I saw that Israel actually is supporting a plan to have aid brought in from Cyprus. You know, make that permanent, give them their own seaport, but we have to keep his attention.
Give them back.
Give them back a seaport, yes. So we have to have, we cannot let all this attention that's been beautiful to see go away. And I'm afraid that it will, because it always has as soon as the violence stops.
And I would just say in whatever way you're able, everyone has their own kind of niche and talents, you know, honor his last wishes of let it be a tale. And whether that's in you know, helping emerging writers, whether that's in your own communities, arranging, you know, teach-ins or perhaps at schools or
using this.
Yeah, there's so exactly places of worship. I mean, these things matter. They reach people. And you can do it in a way, exactly. You could use that. You could use any of his work as well as a sort of starting point to be able to talk about what's happening.
But yeah, he believed in the youth, support the youth. Like I said, they will determine this.
Exactly.
And that's the other thing that we've been saying in some of the senators' offices is you are creating a new generation here who will have no faith. You know, I mean, is this what the lesson you want to teach them? So we need to show them something.
Yeah, I mean, we were just at a meeting of Howard County for a Free Palestine 2 days ago, and these 3 high schoolers came up to me who were 15 and said, you know, well, they spoke to the group, just a few weeks ago, we knew nothing about Palestine. We didn't even know what Palestine was. And then they proceeded to speak articulately for the next 10 minutes about, you know, on par with probably any expert on what was happening in Gaza. And so that to me speaks to the power of not only what he was trying to do, you know, but engaging with youth. One thing that I'm trying to do in my capacity, as in addition to all the other things I do, I direct a youth theater program in where we are in Maryland, and we're working on a play this year based on his story to try to honor his legacy. So I'm hoping if that works out, then we can try to, you know, send it out to other programs as well.
And one of the things that people wrote when Refaat was killed, they wrote خسارة بحجم وطن, a loss the size of a country or of a homeland. And, you know, of course, Refaat wouldn't like to know that this was said about him, but at the end of the day, I mean, martyrdom is great and martyrs are honored, but this is just beyond the loss of a life. I mean, we value his life and everybody else's life. There is also an experience that's lost, and an accumulation of efforts and work and long nights of reading and studying without electricity. Only the people who knew Refaat very well understood what it took for him to obtain the degrees that he was able to obtain and to attend the programs that he was able to attend, the struggles with traveling out of Gaza to go to Malaysia and do his PhD, where he got stuck there and he was blacklisted by a certain Arab country that borders Gaza and was banned from being able to access Gaza and go back to see his wife and kids. And he was forced to pay thousands of dollars to remove his name temporarily from that blacklist, and then to go back to Gaza. And Refaat was supposed to be here this fall. We were planning, as part of the Lighting Gaza book tours, we were working on getting him here, and he was supposed to speak with me at the Palestine Rights Festival in Pennsylvania, at the University of Pennsylvania. But here we are doing this, and it's, you know, but yeah, I mean, we will honor the legacy and the words, but we have to also recognize the scale of the loss. Not just Refaat, man, hundreds and hundreds of doctors and scholars and scientists and writers and authors and teachers and engineers and community leaders and religious scholars, and all of these people, they represent and what it means to have a functional human society that connects with its past, maintains its present, and dreams about its future. The war on the hospitals, right? Like the obsession with the hospital, because the hospital should be the last institution where an aggressor gets to justify an assault on that institution. It is the most sacred of all institutions that define society. So we end up with a situation where even the hospital is violated. And if the hospital is violated, what else is there left not to violate, right? So this is a war on the foundations of a society that managed to realize a potential. I wouldn't say its potential, because its potential has been besieged for many decades. It realized many of its potentials within this confined space, under blockade, under occupation, under isolation, despite living in 8 refugee camps, despite being cut off from the outside world. And this is all gone now, and this needs to be rebuilt. And we, and even I include myself with this external we owe Gaza that, because Gaza screamed and yelled and wrote, and we weren't able, for many reasons, to do anything about it. But now we have to heed the call. So rebuilding Gaza from scratch will be something that we have to contribute to and push for an end of the blockade. This cannot end with the blockade still in place. This cannot end with people are still under siege. So in addition to honoring Refaat's message, I think there is also a political responsibility, one that has to do with continuing the fight for justice in Palestine, using Refaat's words and the words of the hundreds of who were killed as a vehicle to communicate our pain and suffering. But as I wrote in my Nation article, Refaat and his students weren't just writing, as a way of the writing isn't an artistic expression. I mean, the writing is great, right? But this is a call that's two-sided. It starts somewhere and it has to be met by someone. Otherwise, so when, again, I second what was said about the need to, by Pam, the need to continue fighting for Gaza and for Palestinians. Sorry about the speech. Do we have other questions? But there's a follow-up, but let's see if there is another question. Okay.
Hi, my name is Noor. I just want to say thank you everybody for speaking today. And I was wondering if you're okay with it, if you could each share like your favorite memory of Refaat, because I mean, I only know him from Twitter and I know he was a really funny guy. So I was wondering, yeah, I feel like it would be nice. Thank you.
I mean, I think I shared most, but this is one, this is actually kind of funny because we've talking about him in such a serious way, but there was one message he sent me where he was really frustrated because he was trying to get money from the Bank of Palestine. I don't know if you knew about this. And and he was asking if I knew someone, my cousin works there. And he said that he went over there today and he just should read it in Arabic. It's much funnier in Arabic. But he basically says, I raised my voice as though I was in the Friday suit, like suit Jum'ah, you know. Anyways, it was just really fun. It was very like, it seems out of character when you read it, but I mean, it also shows you the level of frustration. He was tired by the end.
Yeah.
He was worn, and you could see it in that video. You could see it in I mean, just trying to survive under such conditions, let alone trying to amplify voices of others, let alone trying to, what he was always so good at is networking and connecting and trying to help everyone around him for the greater cause, right?
So one story that sort of builds into that is that I think you heard that he was very playful. I mean, he liked to sort of tease or needle a little bit. I think, so one of our writers, her name is Amnia, and she's sort of sensitive, and he just always mispronounced her name deliberately. We call it Omema. And it drove her crazy. And she was always, and the more it drove her crazy, the more he just stuck to Omema. And she just told me though, she had recently we were talking about him, and she said that she had seen him like during that truce, time when they were able, and he had called her by her real name, and she found her. She was disappointed, I mean, she hates the fact that's her last memory was he actually finally said Amia, but it somehow captures his sense of humor and what he meant to the writers. Yeah, it really was his way of showing how much he cared about her.
I guess I just have two little stories. One is, so the book is called Short Stories from Young Writers in Gaza, Palestine. And he contributed 3 stories. So we always would tease him like, oh, come on, Refaat, you're not really a young writer. What's the definition of a young writer? And he'd say, well, how old was he at that time? 34. He said, I'm 34. Anybody 34 and younger is a young writer. And he would say the same thing last year, however old he was. I kind of like that idea. I'm 71. I could be a young writer. Why not? But so right now I'm working on this podcast. We're doing 2 episodes a week. It's called the Palcast, and we're doing it in conjunction with a wonderful podcast producer from Dublin, Ireland, and Yusuf Al-Jamal and Tony Groves in Dublin. Yusuf is in
is he Turkey? No.
Yeah, he's in Istanbul, and Tony Groves is in Dublin, and I'm sitting here, and we get together and talk. I'm like, okay, a shameless plug, the Palcast. Look for it on Apple or Spotify or whatever, and give it rave reviews, please. So clearly Refaat had like beautiful teasing names for everybody. I don't know what he called me behind my back, but anyway, whatever.
I don't remember him ever calling you that stuff.
So Tony Groves, who's the Irish, wonderful, wonderful activist podcast producer, said that Refaat used to call him his second favorite Irishman. And then one time he had a conversation with Refaat, and he said, well, you know, I'm sure that Keats was your favorite Irishman, and so I don't mind being your second favorite. And Refaat said, no, Bobby Sands was my favorite Irishman. If you know anything about Irish history, Bobby Sands was an Irish Republican freedom fighter who committed, like he hunger struck himself to death, a real hero for his cause. So that was interesting. And what he used to call Yusuf was his arch nemesis. So I think, you know, he was super proud of Yusuf, and because he called him his arch nemesis. So, you know, it's great that he had this wonderful playful side to himself. You've probably seen on these photos that are cycling through him sitting on our lazy boy recliner. He loved the lazy boy. And every time, you know, he or either Yusuf or I would talk to Refaat, he'd ask, how is the lazy boy? So I think I'm going to have to put a little plaque on the lazy boy, you know, the Refaat El-Haddad Memorial Lazy Boy here.
There it is.
That's so funny.
One of the moments I remember with Dr. Refaat was Dr. Refaat liked eating spicy Ghazawi salad. So we ordered food and he ordered one, and I wasn't a big fan of spicy food back then. And he told me Abuliazi, my family name, but they do it like Abuliazi. And he told me, Abuliazi, you should try this. I was like, no, I will die. You should try this. And he forced me to try it. And I was really in so much burning in my mouth. And in another memory, his lectures always happened to be in 8 a.m., which I was bad with, to come on time at 8 a.m. And once I was late, and one of the guys, my friend Muhammad Hammo, who was also murdered by an Israeli airstrike in this war, this aggression. And he told Muhammad while he was going to the bathroom, you should check if Abuliazi is sleeping on the stairs or not, because I would be often just sitting there. Yeah. Allah yarhamhum.
He, for whatever reason, he entered the North American pizza wars. So in Chicago, he would, you know, instigate and praise the New York pizza, and when in New York, he would, you know, he was such a provocateur, and his enemies really don't understand him. That's why they're very mad at him. But yeah, he loved food, and when we were talking about his visit this fall, I was, you know, talking about all the different pizza places that I've, you know.
You know, he was denied the visa. I don't know if you know this or not. The US wouldn't give him the visa. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll still give you the chance to, but let's see if we have any other questions. I mean, we went over time, but it's fine. We're here to honor the memory and legacy of someone who we need many years to capture. Let's hear from.
Thank you. I just have a comment, actually. So I've been here for almost 2 weeks, and I've been working with the wonderful doctors and other activists. I've been going to Senate and Congress and been meeting aides. So one of the interesting things that I've seen first time in my life is that there are a lot of staff members, and including people that are working at the foreign policy department, that seem to be very empathetic about what's going on and supporting ceasefire. Having said that, one thing I will do to carry on his legacy is to get as many booklets as possible and deliver that to each office, to each senator and congressional leader. And I'll make sure, I'll try our best. I cannot say for certainty, but I will make sure that each of his booklets are read by each elected officials. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, if we don't have any other questions or comments, I'd like to conclude. But again, this is just the beginning of a conversation about Refaat. And as we mourn Refaat, we shall remember that Gaza is still being bombarded, that people are starving, that this genocide is continuing to haunt our people there. So as you know, we leave town for the holidays, as we go back to be with our families, let's just keep up the good work. And even if you're not able to join a protest in the coming week, or speak to your elected representatives, or just keep talking about Gaza and keep Gaza in people's minds and on people's minds and in people's hearts. And in 2024, we will continue the conversation here at the Jerusalem Fund. And we have many events and conversations that we are working on organizing so that we can keep this conversation alive. Pam, Laila, Helena, and Mahmoud, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And I would like just to close by reading 2 paragraphs from Refaat's chapter in... It's okay. From Refaat's chapter in Lighting Gaza, Writings Born of Fire. He wrote, "When I was approached to write for this book, the promise was that it will effect change and that policies, especially in the United States, will be improved. But honestly, will they? Does a single Palestinian life matter? Does it? Reader, as you peruse these chapters, what can or will you do, knowing that what you do can save lives and can change the course of history? Reader, will you make this matter? Gaza is not and should not be a priority only when Israel is shedding Palestinian blood in mass. Gaza, as the epitome of the Palestinian Nakba, is suffocating and being butchered right in front of our eyes, and often live on TV or on social media. It shall pass. The title of his chapter, Gaza asks, when shall this pass? It shall pass, I keep hoping. It shall pass, I keep saying. Sometimes I mean it, sometimes I don't. And as Gaza keeps gasping for life, we struggle for it to pass. We have no choice but to fight. We have no choice but to fight back and to tell her stories for Palestine." Thank you, everyone.